and welcome to episode 10 of the ADHD Unfiltered podcast. I'm Cherry, and I'm here with Emma.
Hello.
And today is all about parenting with ADHD because, as you might know, you might not, we're both mums and we both have ADHD.
Yeah.
And when you have ADHD, it comes obviously in itself with a certain set of challenges that do change over the course of your life. However, when you're a parent, that also comes with a lot of challenges, even for neurotypical people, add ADHD on top, and it feels like this massive, I don't want to swear, but like it feels like absolute chaos.
Yes. Yeah, it's the perfect word for it. And I think, you know, just becoming a mother or a parent anyway is a really overwhelming thing when you go from being so independent to having to take care of a life overnight. But
Oh my
when
God,
you
yeah.
have ADHD, it can be, for me anyway, personally, it was a really, really, really not shattering, but shaking experience. And I would say 100% changed my life, and the course of my life and who I am,
Yeah.
because not for in a bad way, but it was a really eye-opening journey. And I would say it almost created like a spiritual awakening because I went through
Oh,
that much trauma, becoming a mother
oh
and
my goodness, same.
dealing with those emotions. Yeah, I became a different person,
Yeah.
and I think so many people have that experience.
There's so many people who I used to be really great friends with who are just not in my life anymore.
Yeah.
Not because, we had this massive fallout or whatever, but because I changed so much
Yes. Yeah.
overnight, pretty
Yeah.
much.
It pretty much is, isn't it?
Yeah, and they hadn't, and that was absolutely that would have been absolutely fine, but there was also obviously then the mix of COVID and stuff
Yeah.
and lockdowns, and a lot of those kind of just lost touch. And I also found, having ADHD, you might know that you might not. You have sometimes difficulties remembering that certain friends or certain people exist.
Yes.
And it's not like I've forgotten that you actually fully exist. Like it's not like I think you're out of this world,
Yeah.
but you just don't come into my head. And it's nothing personal. It's absolutely nothing personal. I can love this person like
Yeah.
crazy, and I'll be there as making a list of, what friends do I have? What
Yeah.
friends
Yeah.
haven't I
Yeah.
contacted for a while? And I'm like, I'm sure I'm missing some people. And then I'll read it out to my partner and he's like, oh, what about XYZ? And I'm like, oh my God, yes, so true. That person also exists.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and
It's sorry, carry on. I was a bit
that,
interrupting
that's
you.
that's all right. And as a mum, then on top, you're also already so busy with like mum life and trying to
Yeah.
keep on top of everything that sometimes it can be so hard to keep in touch with friends and to even
Yeah.
remember to, text back and to reach out. I mean, those are all kind of things to make plans. But then with ADHD, it becomes even more difficult.
Yeah.
And if they are not the type of person to reach out, or if they take it personally, then, friendships often do unfortunately go apart.
That's actually something that you don't really see much spoken about. Is the loss of friendships when you
Mm,
become a parent, and when you say like combining that with ADHD when you already struggle, and I genuinely will forget to talk to people that I love, and
yeah.
I forget to open their message because I'm in the middle of something, and then 6 days goes by, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't even read that message, and I feel like a terrible friend. When you pair that with becoming a new parent and you're exhausted and you're emotional and you don't really know whether you're coming or going,
Mhm.
it is a recipe for disaster. And if you don't have the right people in your life or the people who get it, it can be so lonely and you kind of isolate yourself without even meaning to,
Yes.
because it just, you don't even have the energy to explain why you've not been present. And sometimes you don't even know. But I mean, I've got people that I haven't seen since the birth of my first child, which was nearly 6 years ago, because I just didn't communicate and they didn't like that. And I look at it now as, well, they weren't meant to be in my life. But at the time, it was really painful.
Mm.
It brought on a lot of rejection sensitivity and feeling as though, life would never be the same and that I was never going to have fun again. And all these really heavy emotions
Yeah.
that I think, when we talk about becoming a parent and being a parent of ADHD, you think of all the obvious problems of, executive dysfunction
Mm.
and getting into gear and being organized. But emotionally, the loss of friendships and the loss of your sense of self as
Mm.
well from having a child is really quite a really awful thing to go through
Yeah.
sometimes, especially if you haven't got a support network around you.
Absolutely. And I think for me, that sort of isolation it was really big.
Mm,
And it can be really scary to come out of that as well. So
yeah.
I'll often go through phases. Well, be all of a sudden I'll get this burst of energy and I'm like, oh my God, I have these friends I haven't spoken to in about a month
Yeah.
and I should probably reach out and maybe we should organize something to be social again. And then I'll have this one day, random day, where I'll text like probably like 10 different people. I
Yeah.
kid you not, 10 different like chats. And I'll be like, oh, let's do something then. And I'll plan like my entire week. It'll be like fully scheduled.
Yes.
And then obviously I also burn myself out with that because after like day 3 of socializing, I'm like, I'm done.
Yes.
I can't, do this any longer.
Yeah.
Despite that I want to. I love socializing, but it's also
Hmm.
really draining because you're constantly, whether you want to or not, also kind of masking those difficulties that you have with like having to blend out background noise, having to try to listen and respond to what the other person is saying
Yes.
without interrupting, without coming across as rude, without showing that you may have just zoned out for parts of the conversation or not.
Yeah. But if you pair that with actually having a child
Yeah.
to keep entertained as well,
Oh,
and you try and have a conversation, we've had conversations about this
yeah.
before, is you can't have catch ups with your friends very easily, especially if they don't have children too. When you have a young child,
Mm.
it's impossible because you've got to think that you're trying to listen to your friend talking. You've also got a toddler or a baby that's needing your attention and climbing all over you or saying, mummy, 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 over and over.
And I
And
get so
that is so
overstimulated.
overwhelming. I mean, I've actually had to say to people before, like, whoa, just give me a minute. Like, I'm overloaded because some people don't get the sign that you're overstimulated and they carry on talking whilst you're trying to deal with your child.
I
And
know.
that to me, sometimes I'm like, read the room. Like, you can see I'm
I
stressed.
know. Oh, I remember those times. They were just pre-COVID. Um, and we used to like go, we had this really lovely like weekly routine, which obviously got fully disrupted by lockdown.
Yeah.
Um, of, going to a cafe, like several mum friends and I. But as soon as my child was crying, I had to tend to her. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't just like let her cry a little bit. That was like the literal tension inside
Oh,
of me was
yeah.
so overwhelmingly big that I had no choice but to tend to her right away. And I
Yes.
know part of that is also a mum thing. Um, but I also am aware now, looking back, it was also probably some emotional dysregulation that was being triggered,
Yeah.
at the same time. And then, or like overstimulation as well. And a lot of the times they were having these chats, they were, catching up, they were talking about, what was coming up, what happened,
Yeah.
answering each other's questions. And I'd be like, I've not heard anything of what you just said for the last 5 minutes because my child was crying. I can't,
Yeah.
I physically cannot listen when she's crying or now needing my attention.
Yes.
Is this absolute overwhelm and overstimulation of information where I'm like, I literally started to say, hang on a second, just wait a second. But they wouldn't wait. They would just
No.
carry on talking. And I'm like, I okay,
Like,
I'm not
don't expect a response from me because I
I
can't.
can't, yeah, I can't contribute now. I even started saying to them, I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything of what you just said.
Yes. Yeah. I
Um,
think, and I do think that some mums or parents don't experience that. They don't get that same For me, it's like I get sent into fight or flight
Mm.
when my children cry, and it's overstimulation, it's overload, it's probably some sort of childhood trauma in me as well, to be honest. And I cannot relax if they are upset, if they are needing me, even if they're just talking over me. It's like this feeling of like alarm bells if I
Mm.
ignore them and I try and concentrate on someone else's conversation, and then I feel rude to the person that's talking to me, and I feel like sometimes socializing when you're a parent is actually really exhausting. And even just planning the bag that you need to take out for what they need, whether it's snacks, if they're still really little, whether it's nappies, wipes, all of that was so overwhelming to me at the beginning
Yeah.
when I was first time mum, that I just isolated myself. I became a hermit, and I because I didn't drive, I had to go on the bus,
Mm.
and it was always just so
Oh,
overwhelming and overstimulating. And I think I really
I
struggled. I really struggled with all of those, aspects that I struggled with silently as an adult, but I could cope because I had no other external, stress really.
yeah,
But as soon as I had a baby, wow, I,
that
I
is,
I became so much more sensitive to
and
everything.
I think that's exactly it. What a lot of kind of parents will experience is, and I used to describe it to other people being like, I feel like the part of me that was fine, that was able to just about cope with having ADHD, is now fully preoccupied with everything child related.
Yes,
And that
yeah.
part doesn't exist anymore. And therefore, I can't cope anymore with my
Yeah.
ADHD symptoms. They suddenly felt so overwhelmingly obvious and big
Yes.
that was hard to ignore. And at the time, I didn't really even look into ADHD symptoms, how it might impact you, how it might impact you when you're a mum. I mean, I
Yeah.
was completely oblivious to it because I just kind of like disregarded it and was like, well, I was kind of fine until now. I mean,
Yeah,
take
yeah.
away the years in and out of therapy, but
Yeah, yeah, that doesn't matter. That was nothing.
had the impulsive decisions, moving countries, that
Yeah,
sort of
that's just
nah.
no,
Um,
it's all good. That's
totally
something
unrelated, right?
I mean, I was so oblivious too. I mean, I didn't even have a clue that I had ADHD. So it wasn't even something that I didn't even realize that I was just coping beforehand, before children. I didn't
Yeah,
even realize how bad I struggled with stuff. And
yeah.
yeah, it was a really big wake up call to me. And I think I struggled really bad with postnatal anxiety. Now I definitely know that I had that as a separate thing because
Mm.
the symptoms were very much on that. But I also thought that I had postnatal depression. And then I really looked into it about a year or so after my son was born. And this was around the same time that my friend said to me, I really think you should look into ADHD. And I found myself, Googling, is parenting harder for people with ADHD? And the websites that were coming up in the forums and all these things were so validating to read. And I was like, that's me. That's what I struggle with. And postnatal depression postnatal depression never really made sense for me because it
Same.
wasn't that it wasn't that intensity. It wasn't like I wanted to just run away,
Mm.
and like nothing to do with my love for my child or wanting
Exactly.
anything bad to happen. It was purely just exhaustion and
Mhm.
burnout and
Burnout.
not having time to cope. That
And
was essentially it.
that was so true for me as well. I definitely can relate to the postnatal anxiety. There was definitely
Mm,
a part of that. But I also found myself Googling, is it postpartum depression? Is
yeah.
it postpartum rage?
Yes.
I
All
get
the
so
rage.
irrationally angry,
Yeah.
and snap
Oh, me
and I
too.
really I feel so sorry for my partner at the time, and I still feel guilty now, to be
Yeah.
honest, because
Yeah.
I was not a great person to be around, but I knew it at the time, and I
Mm,
wanted so desperately to change, and I
it's
just didn't know how. I was like,
yeah.
this isn't me. This isn't like, and now
Oh,
knowing, I know it was just absolute overstimulation, overwhelm,
yeah.
and emotional dysregulation, just all at once, and it
Uh,
would come out in
Just
snapping and
really,
being,
yeah.
like I remember we got a puppy. I mean, great decision, obviously. Completely
Already overloaded.
non-ADHD related.
Yeah.
just just as I was finishing the last year of my degree with a 1-year-old
I've had more stress.
in lockdown.
Yay.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Yeah.
And I was so absolutely overwhelmed that I remember this one thing happened that wasn't in my control, and I wanted to hit the wall. Like, I had this overwhelming amount of tension, and I was like, I just want to hit and stomp the wall and like throw a cushion. I was
Yeah.
so angry, and it was scaring myself. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't let it out in my partner that way.
No.
Of course not. I never let it out on my child because
No.
of the perfectionist side of myself. And also, again, I think you kind of touched on that a little bit. There's a lot of kind of trauma that comes up when you're a parent, like
Yes.
things that you're suddenly having to deal with from childhood that you didn't know were even
You
there.
didn't even know. I know.
And
That's
it
such a
made me
challenge.
so overcompensate to the point where I was like such a perfectionist and trying to do everything by the book. And you
Yeah.
know, I had such an issue even letting her play alone because I was like, I hope she doesn't think I'm neglecting her. She was 3 months.
Oh, yes. I still have that to this day. I
Me
still
too.
feel those feelings. Like if my eldest is outside, he loves to play outside the front with his cars. And I'll go out and I'll keep like, so it's literally in the driveway of the house, and I'll go out and be like, "Do you want me to play? Do you want to come in?" And he's like, "No, I'm okay." And I'm like standing there like, I really feel like I want you to be playing with someone. But
Yeah.
that's my problem. That's my projection, where he's actually fine and he's thriving.
Yeah.
But it takes me back to 5-year-old me sat really wanting someone to play with. And, it brings up all those wounds that you didn't know you had, like you say. So then you've got to fight those battles of, why am I feeling like this? This is really intense. The rage that you feel, which is 100% ADHD, just losing your coping mechanisms, going into burnout, emotional dysregulation through the roof, the executive dysfunction. My home had never looked so, like, it was bad. The first few months after having my son, I just didn't care anymore. It was like I had nothing left to care. Or I say that I cared and I felt shame, but it wasn't even enough to motivate me to get that dishwashing done or put the laundry away. And my partner, he worked night shifts, so it was like I felt so overloaded and lonely and stressed, and I didn't really have a support network. And I think that for
No,
me, I just felt like a terrible
neither did
mum.
I at the time,
No,
actually.
no
And
village to call on,
no,
and no, I just felt like, I remember Googling, being like, I actually remember this one Google of signs that you're a bad mum, because I thought that I thought that I couldn't cope and that I shouldn't be one. Luckily, I don't feel like that now, because I've worked hard on that, and I've worked hard on what kind of parent I want to be. But man alive, those battles that I had inside my head that no one knew about as a first time parent, it all makes sense now that I
yeah,
have my diagnosis. It makes so much sense, and I just feel so sorry for the mums out there that will be feeling like we did and have
yeah.
no clue. And I hope
That's
that they come across this podcast and they're like,
Yeah. It's
"Oh,
actually one of the reasons why I started my social media channel in the first place, and why I started posting about ADHD, because I was
yeah,
like, I don't want anyone to go through what I had to go through
yeah,
to finally then realize it was all ADHD related,
it,
if they can avoid it. You know,
yes,
I went there. I so wished I had been more aware, because as you say, like once I came, like I actually came across like a video of women with ADHD and then mums with ADHD, and was like, oh my goodness, it
Yeah.
all makes sense.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
it. It wasn't postpartum depression because I had no difficulties with bonding with my child. I
No.
didn't like fear those kind of things and had these kind of thoughts that are very much like postpartum
Yeah.
depression symptoms. That wasn't the case. If anything, I was like very much over the top. And yeah, I also realize and recognize now that actually my child is probably one of my biggest dopamine sources or like hyperfixations of all times, but at the
Yeah.
same time, also the biggest source of overstimulation and
Oh God.
overwhelm.
Yeah.
Like
Yes. But
it's that very much, you know, very those
push and pull.
contrasting things. Yes,
I get it.
absolutely.
My children, they make me laugh like no one else.
Hmm.
And Milo the other day, he just had so much joy. It was Halloween and people were trick or treating, and he was shouting out the window, being like trick or treat, and to his friends, and his giggle and his laugh just filled me with such joy. And then my toddler just brings so much light to my life. But oh my lord, can they test the absolute patience of my soul? There are times where I'm just so overstimulated, and that's the thing, is you have to realize that's my problem, that I'm overstimulated. That's
Hmm.
not their problem. And I've worked so hard in the last 2 or 3 years to really like try and not project that, and try and find ways to cope with it, rather than being that snappy shouty mum that
Yeah,
you have to tread on eggshells around. I don't want to be a mum that they remember being very up and down.
absolutely.
It's not the goal that I want.
And I think it's very interesting that we're both and I hope that doesn't sound, weird, but kind of like cycle breakers.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I agree.
with us both being aware that we have in ADHD individually, and actually having ADHD has made me so self-aware and it's made
Mm,
me become a better person because I've been
yes.
able to, for the first time, let go or start to let go of some guilt and shame. I mean, there's still a long way to go. And that
Yeah.
guilt and shame still keeps coming up, especially, when I forget play dates, when I forget to
Oh, yeah.
organize something for us to do. And she'll be like, Mummy, what are we doing today? I'm like, I don't know. I've not thought
Yeah.
about it ahead. And then she'll be like, can I see that friend? And I'm like, I haven't asked them. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I feel
Yeah.
so bad. Or like those times where she'll be like wanting to wear something specific and she'll keeps asking for it and it's in the laundry and I haven't washed it yet.
Oh, I have
And
that problem all the time.
it keeps reminding me of all the things that I've failed to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So actually I came across an article that said actually one of the biggest symptoms and struggles for mums with ADHD is the guilt and shame that you have around your symptoms impacting not only
Oh,
you and your
Ben.
life, but also them
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
wanting to. You don't want your struggles to impact their lives.
Yeah.
And it's really hard because you also constantly compare yourself to other mums and neurotypical mums, and I remember like watching these like videos of these seemingly perfect mums and households and stuff like that, and with their morning routines
Oh,
and
I
their evening
know.
routines and whatnot, and I could never relate. I was
No.
like, I don't know how they do it. I
But do you
don't
know what? I don't think they even do. I don't think they
know.
even do. I
Probably
think it's
not.
all put on for camera. That's something that's healed me, is I used to feel the same way. I used to think like,
Hmm.
well, I'm a terrible person because I don't even have anything close to that. And the more I think about it, the more I think, well, actually, no, we have a home full of love. We have sometimes a different bedtime than we did the night before because things changed, and
Yeah,
they've gone to bed safe and they've gone to bed loved. And
yeah,
it's so hard on ourselves anyway. And yeah, the shame that I feel. I mean, I told you not long ago, I forgot that football club wasn't on for my eldest, and I was late picking him up from school, so about 45 minutes late. And then 2 days later, I forgot that it was school uniform, as no school uniform. So he went in school uniform, all his friends weren't, and I just felt absolutely mortified, so embarrassed, and so like all the time walking
yeah.
home, I was like, I am a terrible person. I'm a terrible mother. They're all going to think it. That's what they're all thinking. No one's thinking that. And
No.
They
And
all
you're
know that
absolutely
I'm not a
not.
bad mum, and
No,
no
you're
one's
a
thinking
brilliant
he's
mum.
fine. Well, I try my best, and, you know, I think one of the things that I struggle with the most, and it's one of the things I really try working on and being the best I can, is trying to sound interested and enthusiastic when they are talking about something that you're not necessarily
Mm.
interested in. And with an adult, I'm a lot more like blunt and kind of, I don't care. But with my children, I want them to feel as though they are the most important thing ever, and I want them to
Yeah.
think that I care about everything they say. But my lord, when I've heard about, 12,000 hours about Minecraft, it gets to the point where I'm like, awesome, mate, that's great. I'm just going to go on and do what I need to do, because you get to that point where there's no validation left that you can give because you are
Yeah.
frazzled. And I do think we have that people pleasing part that comes into that,
Massively
where we,
so.
even with our
Mhm.
children, we
And
have so many levels of dimensions of
even
different challenges.
the rejection sensitivity. I
Oh
mean,
gosh,
I
yeah.
I constantly fear that other people will feel rejected by her when she
Yes.
doesn't react in a certain way or doesn't like greet them in a certain way. And I don't make her greet them in a
No.
certain way or whatever. I don't I've I've learned to kind of just it's not ideal, but almost internalize that and not let that out.
Yeah.
Um but it's very much I realize, or I can see, I'll be there kind of almost justifying. I'm
Do you
like, oh,
overcompensate?
so much, so
Same.
much.
Same,
I'm like,
same,
oh,
same.
she's like that to everyone,
She's
or
just,
oh, she
yeah.
just takes a little bit to warm up,
Yeah.
or
When we don't need
um,
to do that. We don't
no,
need
we
to
don't need to
explain
do
that,
that.
do
But
we?
it's no, but it's that almost like that rejection sensitivity on, yeah, as a third person, which is really odd.
I
But
get it with my son's friends, and Milo, he was kind of not meaning to, but seemingly leaving someone out because he was so interested in the conversation. And I was watching from the kitchen window, and I was like feeling so bad for this kid. And it wasn't even a big deal. The kid was fine. He was waiting patiently. But I actually had to go out and just gently be like, mate, come here a sec. And I was like, make sure that you include him in the conversation. And he's like, oh, sorry, yeah. And I'm like, that's one I think is important, because I don't want him to end up leaving people out and not being kind. But I think it's me overcompensating, because I'm remembering being that child myself, but I'm also remembering being the child that actually upset people without meaning to, because I was talking to someone else. And
it's
you kind of,
so true.
so
I
many
had
levels of it.
pretty much a very, very similar situation the other day, and I also have it with her when I realize, oh, she's being left out or somebody is not listening to what she's
Yeah.
saying. And I think that's again it. I constantly try and like respond ASAP to what she's saying, because I don't
Yeah.
want her to feel ignored,
I
because
know.
of the times that I felt ignored
Yeah.
or left out or whatever. And sometimes I'll see her and I'll watch her and I'm like, oh no, she's trying so hard to like kind of
Yes.
participate, but she's not getting it.
Oh,
And
I
I'm like,
know.
ah, it's something. It's a whole nother dimension of things that I'm having to work through
Yeah.
myself. But
Yeah.
I'm just kind of, for any kind of any mums that might be relating, the self-awareness is the first step,
Yeah.
and being aware of that you need to kind of be kinder to yourself and more
Yes.
compassionate to yourself is massive. And I actually feel self-compassion has changed so much, because I also neglected my own needs so
Yeah.
much. I'd meet her needs but then completely forget about my own.
Yeah.
And it's hard enough already to meet your basic needs when you have ADHD, and when you have a child on top of that, it's hard. You'll do everything that you can to meet their needs,
Yeah.
and
And you
then
let
you
yourself
sometimes
go.
have nothing left for yourself.
Yeah.
And that can really, really contribute to emotional difficulties and kind of
Yes.
feeling triggered and those sort of things, because if you're not nourished well, if you're not hydrated well enough, if you're not kind of balanced and having those like very basic needs met, I mean, sleep is a massive one. You're sleep
Yeah.
deprived, and sleep deprivation itself is known to show as ADHD type symptoms. If you have
Yeah.
ADHD, you can double that. So,
Well, that's I think one of the in fact, that's a huge point that you've just made with the sleep is going from having all the sleep that you want to then having a child and waking up every 2 hours in the night for feeding. That is so, so, so challenging because sleep for me is regulating. I mean, it is for everyone, but if I don't get a minimum of 6 hours sleep, the next day I will feel depressed. I will feel very low. I will feel very, I don't want to do anything. When you have no choice but to get up and do things and you feel like that, that was the hardest bit for me was the anxiety it caused of knowing that I couldn't get the sleep I needed to rest and kind of ease my anxiety. I was exhausted. I was so anxious. I was going to bed crying because I was just so aware that I wouldn't get the sleep I needed. And I
yes.
used to think that that was me being selfish. And now I look and it's like, no, that was just my brain being so tired and all these symptoms coming up to the surface that I didn't even have a clue that I was battling, really.
I had this like massive nighttime anxiety, right?
Yes,
Like when I was
as soon as
still
it went
like
dark.
breastfeeding, and and I remember talking about it to my partner, and he said like one of the most helpful things that was like right in the kind of newborn phase, right in the thick of it.
Mm,
Um, and he said, you're still thinking of a day like a 12-hour day, 12-hour day, 12-hour night. But
yeah,
actually, you have to think of it like a 24 hours one. Like you can sleep at any point in the day.
yeah,
You have to like treat as if the night and day, they're blurred into one. You don't
yeah.
just have like a 12-hour day, 12-hour night. You have a 24-hour day night
That's
sort of
so
thing.
true. Yeah.
And it kind of let me ease some of my anxieties, because he's like, you don't have to like be up at a certain time, you don't have to be
Mm,
awake at a certain time
yeah.
if she's asleep. And I know that is what you can do if you've got one. If you've got two,
Yeah,
obviously
it's
that's not possible
definitely different.
anymore.
But you've got to find even with two, you still
Mm,
got to find ways that you can rest and you that you can make that work because I think that's actually crucial for being able to cope is getting that bit of rest. I didn't utilize that. I when Milo would nap, I used to think that's, oh, I should be doing something. I should be
same.
doing something productive. I should be doing something that is good for me. And I actually started hyperfixating at the time on tarot cards and
Mm,
oracle cards and stuff like that. Looking back, that was a pure distraction of the big heavy feelings I had. But I would do things like that, and I would keep myself so busy so that by the time he woke up, I was even more irritable and anxious. And with my second, I learned if he's sleeping, I am sleeping, and I don't care if there's dishes that need doing. I don't care if the house is a state. I'm
yeah.
sleeping. And it's having that, you know, confidence to think the house can wait and just taking care of yourself. And, you know, if there is mums listening to this and you're in that thick of it stage and you've got a newborn, I just want to say to you though, it goes so much quicker than you feel like it is right now. And there
You
will
feel
be a
like it's
time when
never gonna end.
you think, oh, when you're in it, you think, this is my life now. And it can feel really daunting and really lonely.
Mm,
But when you come out of it, you gain back that part of yourself that you lost, and you can look back with so much compassion at yourself of, wow, I really did that. And even on the days and the nights that you think that you can and you will. And it is a struggle, but you're not alone. And I think we should almost actually make like a little mums group, like a support group or something, just so we
yeah.
can actually just sometimes, you know, if a mum is up at 2 o'clock in the morning and there's another mum up at 2 o'clock in the morning, they can have a little chat and a little just solidarity wave of, you know, it's just, I think that's so important, to be
Oh, that
honest.
almost gives me goosebumps, because I'm just kind of thinking back of how much I wanted that when I was
Yeah,
in the
me
thick of it.
too.
And I think there's a big part again of just, yeah, learning, you know, that you still matter, you
Yes.
know.
Don't put yourself
It's
last.
no, exactly. I always wanted to say I don't want to put myself first, but I'm going to put myself on the same page as my child.
Yes.
So I kind of like started to use that kind of me as well approach of like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to meet her needs of getting some food. I will now eat as well. I
Yes.
and I kind of like almost try to use that as a way of trying to make sure that my basic needs are going to be met because
Yes.
they weren't for a long, long time,
No,
and it
no, same.
really contributed for
I'm going to
a
start
lot of
doing
my
that now.
difficulties.
Yes. I mean, well, I spoke to you the other day. We were saying it was 5 o'clock and I hadn't eaten. My children had eaten. They had been taken care of all day. And what they were eating at the time, I didn't really want. So then I would think, oh, I'll eat later. And it got to 8 o'clock until I finally ate. And I
Mhm.
kind of thought to myself, that's not okay. That's not
No,
that's not looking after myself. That's
and
leaving myself as an afterthought.
exactly, and you know, you can only kind of you can't function that well, can you,
No, no.
if you don't look after yourself?
And you're more prone to irritable outbursts,
Yes,
snapping, having less patience. And then all it does is create more shame and you make yourself feel worse in the long run. So
absolutely,
just eat a banana, even if it's just a
and
banana or an apple.
if you're someone who's really really struggling with like snapping at your children, please know this is not us kind of like putting you down or whatever, but more kind of so saying there are ways to be able to reduce that snapping. I'm not saying
Yes.
stopping it because I'm by no
We
means
all snap.
100% perfect. Absolutely. I
Yeah.
still sometimes will snap when, especially if I'm overstimulated or
Oh,
stressed or
yeah.
if I haven't met my daily needs.
Yeah.
But being aware of what your triggers are, you know, that kind of stacked up approach of, you know, that tension that builds up more and more and
Yeah.
more throughout the day, and then knowing how to stop that or how to prevent that is really really important. And and if you do snap, absolutely it happens.
Oh,
Your child
yeah.
will not love you any less,
No.
and you're not no less of a good mum. But what I will say is something that has been very healing myself is actually apologizing and fully
Oh,
owning up to my behavior to her.
yes.
um and and I think, you know, it doesn't just teach her that, you know, I make mistakes too, but it teaches her, one, that it's not okay to be spoken at a certain way. I'll always be
Hmm.
like, I'm sorry, mummy shouldn't have shouted.
Yes. Yeah.
um I will not excuse it by blaming her. I wouldn't be like, oh, but you did X,
But
Y,
yeah.
Z.
Oh, yeah.
um I'll be like, I'm sorry, mummy shouted and that wasn't okay. It's not okay for anyone to shout at you, not for mummy to shout at you.
Hmm.
What should mummy do next time, you know, to not shout? Should I?
Yeah.
And then she'll be we'll be brainstorming together, and she'll be now coming up with, take a deep breath. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good
Oh,
one. Or she'll be like, have some quiet time. I was like, yes, actually quiet time is really really good for me.
yeah.
And now that I, you know, have been using it and practicing it more and more, she'll take quiet time herself as well, and
That's
she
so
knows
good.
how to apologize when she's shouted, you know.
Yes.
it's it's that.
It's teaching them the right things by
Yeah,
showing them your mistake
yeah,
and taking accountability for that. Because there's nothing worse, in my opinion, of having I never got apologized to, ever. And I would be sat in my room so upset, and then I would come out and everyone just acted as if nothing happened. There was never any communication or accountability.
yeah,
And I grew up thinking that I was a problem, actually. So with Milo, he at one point it was just me and him, and there was a lot of times where I was much more shouty than I ever wanted to be, not at him but around him. And with him now, I'm so conscious of bringing him up to be an emotionally regulated boy, because at some point he's going to need to be an emotionally regulated man. And with him, we it's always quite a lot of energy and anger, so we rip up the paper and we take our anger out on the paper together. And now he's quite good at going, I need my paper. And I'm like, oh, I'm
it's
so glad that I've
amazing.
taught him that one, at least one thing where he can regulate and take out
Yeah,
that anger and know it's not a negative and it's not something to be ashamed
no,
for.
And that's the thing. I think a lot of the times, especially our generation, but probably as well when you grow up with undiagnosed ADHD or
Yeah.
untreated ADHD or unrecognized ADHD, is you'll be taught that your emotions, your big emotions, are bad emotions.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
overreacting, they're drama, they need to be
Dramatic.
stopped ASAP, and you need to behave better because that's bad behavior.
Yeah.
And there's no such thing as bad emotions. But there are good ways of coping with strong emotions, and
Mm,
then there are unhealthy ways of coping with big emotions. And I had to, and I still am having to reteach myself a lot of coping strategies, especially around anger. And I'm teaching my daughter that she can, I said she can stomp, she can kick the air, she can even hit the pillow. I don't
yeah.
care. Like, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
She's not hurting anyone.
Exactly.
But I'm also talking her through, I'm like, what helps you then once you've let that energy out? Because anger is pent up energy. It needs to go
Oof,
out
yeah.
somehow.
Yeah.
You can't just breathe it away in that moment. And once she's kind of let that out, I'm like, what helps you
Mm,
calm down? And she'll be like, oh, sucking my fingers, because she sucks her fingers.
yeah.
Or she'll be like, oh, some quiet time. Or actually, most of the time she'll be saying cuddle. And I'm
Oh.
so proud of her. So she's just turned 4, and she's recently started to learn to say, I'm so angry now, I need a cuddle. But she says it in a really
Oh.
angry way. She's like, I
Oh,
need a
that's so
cuddle.
sweet.
And I'm like, yes, of
That's
course,
so
come
good
here.
though.
And I love it. I'm really proud of that. And
It
sometimes
takes a
she'll
lot to
she'll run
teach that
away,
too.
and
Yeah.
she'll be like, Mummy, I do not want you to follow you. I need some quiet time. I'm like,
Yes.
okay. And I've never told her to go up in her
No.
room or go away when, I've more kind of unintentionally modeled that
Modeled.
by
Yeah.
taking myself away before I'd snap.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've seen ways that with Milo on the opposite side of that scale, where he's modeled my unhealthy responses to stuff, where I've had to step in, and it's been a wake up call to myself. And this has been totally vulnerable here. But, when he will react in a way it is quite dramatic, and it's quite like, whoa. And I'm like, okay, I can be like that. I can be very emotionally dysregulated sometimes over a slight change, and not so much anymore. I've got much better at being on a bit of a base level, but he's obviously witnessed that, and that's where I have to take accountability and be like, right, okay, this is a lesson for me, and this is for where I can step in and do the work, because we have to admit sometimes that we have messed up a bit with
Yeah.
things. You're not going to have a perfect experience as a parent. There's going to be times where you think, damn it, that
You're
I
a
could have done
human as
better.
well. Like,
Exactly.
you're not a robot, you're not a machine,
No, but
you're
the
not.
the worst thing you can do is feel shame, because if you
Yeah.
feel that shame, you're going to keep yourself in that cycle. And
Yeah.
for me now, I'm like, okay, it's done. He's reacted in a way that isn't healthy. How can we make it healthy? And hopefully it will help me as well.
You know,
Um,
if it
but
makes you feel any better, my daughter is also very dramatic, and
I wonder who they get it from. I mean, it's
I
definitely
don't
not
know.
from us.
I'll sometimes sit there or we'll talk about it, like me and my partner, and I'm like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Oh,
Sorry, it's me all
some of the
over.
things I actually like Milo's defiance and his utter stubbornness sometimes. And I can't, there's nowhere he gets it from me, 100%. And this is why with him, though, I'm like, if you don't want to do that, mate, that's fine. Like, I get it, because as someone who's like that, if I really don't want to do something, I don't want to do it. And this is, you've got to pick your battles, I think,
Yes,
sometimes.
very
Um,
much.
but before we end the episode, you had a question
Mm.
from one of your followers.
I did. It was actually quite commonly asked if that they had just started to realize or recognize or see ADHD symptoms themselves after they'd become a parent, but they never really thought of it before.
Mhm.
And they wondered, why that is and if that could still be ADHD. And I wanted to take a quick, minute to discuss that a little bit. Because one, there is a lot of kind of stuff out there that definitely says the more responsibilities you have, the more your ADHD symptoms will become apparent,
Yeah.
because, you know, you can only try and masks at so many different stages, and then at some point it'll just all crumble
Yeah.
down, and you will show your difficulties, you will show your struggles, and it will become more apparent, you know, especially as an adult. um but also, I do also want to say that, you know, symptoms will still have to have been present in childhood
Yeah.
and during, you know, your childhood, teenagehood, um, even before being a parent. But the symptoms will might look different. You know,
Yes.
they will change over time, because, you know, you don't have the same struggles now as you have had when you were like an 8-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. A lot more stress, a lot more challenges, and a lot less time to cope when you I think one thing I want to say before I forget though is how similar CPTSD and ADHD can present, and how if someone doesn't necessarily remember any symptoms from childhood, but they had quite a traumatic birth or a traumatic pregnancy, it is worth looking into potentially talking to your GP about CPTSD, because that can also be another um, thing to take into consideration, or postnatal depression or anxiety. They can present similarly. So
Yeah.
if there was no obvious signs in childhood, it's not just gonna develop overnight.
No.
That would be something more in the line of trauma. Um, and annoyingly, they do present really
Or
very
yeah,
similar.
absolutely. Or other mental health conditions.
Yeah.
And that's not us invalidating your struggles. It's
Oh, no
more of
way.
a thing that if you get the right diagnosis, you'll get better treatment. You'll
The
get
right
the right
support.
treatment and the
Yeah.
right support. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's really what it is about. So I do think every time, you know, if there are people who think they've got ADHD, but they actually might not, it's not invalidating their struggles, because the
No.
struggles are very much still there. It
Hmm.
just needs a different type of support or treatment, you
Yeah.
know, that will be better suited.
Exactly. I think that's a good place to end today, is just, you know, please don't be afraid. If you're listening to this and you can relate to everything that we're saying and you're right in the thick of it, maybe you just become a parent, please ask for support, even if it's just a friend, just someone that you feel safe with. Don't keep all those feelings inside. Don't struggle on your own, because I promise you, the moment that you reach out to someone that you trust, you will feel better and you will get
Yeah.
that support. And there are so many, amazing mental health workers out there, and health visitors who will understand as well. Just speak out and get that support
Yeah.
before it gets to the point where it's really, really a problem.
Yeah.
That's my biggest regret, is that
You
I struggled in silence for so
yeah,
long.
absolutely. And you don't have to suffer alone, and
No,
there's absolutely no shame in struggling as a
no.
mum. It doesn't make you a bad mum.
It
Absolutely
makes you a
not.
mum that cares. I
Yeah.
mean, this is one of the most healing things I ever heard. A bad mum wouldn't be worrying if she was a bad mum.
Yes,
And that,
same.
like,
Absolutely.
it
Like
changed my brain chemistry, because I
the
was like,
very
wow.
Absolutely. The very fact that you're worried about whether you're a bad mum
Yeah.
probably makes you a good one.
Yeah. Or at least it makes you someone that wants to do the best
Yeah.
for your child. And I would say there's been times I haven't been the best mum. I've been a mum that's
No.
struggling and in survival mode. But my goodness, did I work my little butt off. Well, I wouldn't say little, actually quite big. My butt off to get to the point of
Sorry.
healing. And I don't know why I
I'm
said that.
working on that one.
It's
I'm physically like in the gym working on my
trying to get a
butt.
big bum.
Yeah.
I want to get. I've got a big
Sorry.
bum. I just need my bum to not be like my. It's not the bum I want. Okay, I want like a J Lo or Beyonce esque. Just
I always had a flat one. Like I was like barely any bum, and I'm really working
now
there.
you're weird.
I'm doing the squats, you know.
I love how that was the perfect
Sorry.
ADHD tangent, and I love that. And do you know what? I think it's good to end it on a lighter note, because hopefully that made someone laugh as well and brought them out of feeling rubbish. So
Yes.
yeah, we
So,
you know,
at us both trying to not interrupt each other and then not saying anything at all.
We've done so well. We were also meant to keep, guys, every episode, I swear to God, we're like, right, this one will be 30 minutes. It's never 30 minutes. It's 49
We try
minutes now.
so hard.
We
Which
do. We
we really
genuinely do.
do.
The worst thing is I'm looking at the time and I'm like, we've still got stuff to say.
My Chinese is probably cold already. It's
Has it
probably
already
yeah.
arrived?
I don't know. I don't know if
Oh,
it's arrived or not.
you,
But I know I ordered myself Chinese, so there it is. You know, you can
I
treat
did
yourself
tonight
to
too.
take out. Yes, there we are.
Chinese, Chinese
Yeah.
takeaway is my favorite at this point. I go through stages where it's either Indian or Chinese, but right now hits the spot. I
Yeah.
hope you enjoy it. I hope it's not arrived and it's gone cold. I will be
Oh, it'll be
devastated for you.
fine.
All right, it's all right. I like
I
that
can always
attitude.
heat it up.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world. Right, guys, thank you. I've gone
So much
delirious. I'm
for
not even gonna lie.
listening.
I'm actually gone to the point where I've forgot words and forgot who I am.
That was me at the start.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for listening. And if you're not following us, what are you doing?
yeah.
Hit
Come
the follow
on,
button.
just give us. Oh God, I burped. Loads of things happen at once. Give us a cheeky follow on Instagram, on Spotify. You can even do it on YouTube if you really want to push the boat out. We are also going to be in.
TikTok.
Oh yeah, and TikTok as well.
I
How can I
know.
forget? And we are
I
also.
keep forgetting.
I know I forget about, honestly, every single time I forget that we have a TikTok. We also
Me
are
too.
going to be bringing out a Patreon soon, which
Yes.
we'll give more details about soon, but it will give you the chance to have some more stuff, basically. I forgot words, Terry.
Be more
Content.
involved.
Yeah, be more involved.
And
Chat to us.
also, yeah, you'll get extra content from it as well. So it's, you know,
Why
we're
wouldn't you do
us
that?
being perfectionists, we
Yes.
want to make sure that whatever we put out there is very good value.
Mhm. We
Um,
just want it to be a nice way to like build more of a community where I
yeah,
guess that could be our little support network actually. So,
I would
you
love
know,
that.
I would love
Absolutely.
it too. And I just want to say that if you are struggling and you don't feel like you have anyone to talk to,
Yeah,
then please feel free that you can reach out to us. And
absolutely.
if you really do need some support or just rant, then, you know, I might take a few days to reply, but I will reply in the end.
Yeah,
just know.
I might take a few weeks.
Yeah. 7 years
But
later.
well, no, honestly, I will try. I always try my best to respond.
Me too. And I
And my deepest
do.
apologies if I've missed you.
I will just say if anyone's messaged, especially to the podcast page on Instagram, we're not the best. We're not the best with like we have our own like social media as
I mean,
well. So we do get a bit overloaded. We're not ignoring you. I promise you
no.
that. And we appreciate you listening
If it
so,
makes
so
you
much.
feel any better, I also sometimes forget to respond to family and friends,
Oh,
and
mate,
sometimes
same.
that'll be weeks as
Yeah.
well. So,
Yeah,
you know,
literally.
it's not just you.
Yeah. I feel most people will probably relate. But anyway, before I waffle on anymore, it's got to
Yeah.
52 minutes. Oh my God.
There we are. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.